All right. We are excited to talk today about the holiday season and about why a time that should be the happiest, most joyful, merriest time of year, unfortunately, look at the statistics, it is one of the most stressful times of year. And it's really not even close, right? People during this time often experience higher degrees of depression, burnout, loneliness, conflict, drug and alcohol use goes up. I know it's not painting a very merry picture there, right? Not exactly what we see on the commercials and the sensationalization of this month of December. And Merry Christmas, a holiday that I certainly love and adore. Is certainly very meaningful to me. But wanted to dive in and talk about how you can reclaim that joy, right? Kind of what are some of the factors that tend to rob us of this joy that we'd love to experience, and help people to really be able to reclaim, how to channel some of that stress that is inevitable during this time, and transform it into positive fuel, and how to anchor down, right? A word that we were just talking about before we jumped on here, anchor
Yeah.
down to your true north, so that even as all the things that you can't control, might be stressful and might be difficult, you are firmly planted into who you are. That just remains, you have composure, and there's a sense of being true to who you are during this time that allows you to rise up and have autonomy, freedom, joy, and all those things, even as it's chaos around you. So, Mr. David Austin, it's been a while since I've had the
I
pleasure
know,
of
man.
getting a chance to talk with you here. But yeah, what do you think about the holidays, and what's your association with them in regards to kind of stress and joy, and what we're talking about here?
Isn't it funny when we think about Christmas, right? We think of, have yourself a merry little Christmas, and quite often it's have yourself a miserable Christmas, and
That
it's
still
it's
sounded good though.
I so here's the funny thing though is quite often, we enter the holiday a little bit behind the curve with regards to, the season of giving, of the obviously mirroring the ultimate gift, right? But then we're busy, we're working, we're doing all kinds of things, and we haven't gotten our shopping done, and then it just starts all this. It's like this kind of head of steam starts to build, and by the time you get a week before Christmas, you're like, man, I want to be done with this,
Yeah,
sometimes. And I think that quite often though we don't have a definition of success in advance. We've not painted
good
that
point.
picture where we know, hey, I want this month to look like this. And for everybody it might be different. There's some people who just love all of the parties, and they love the Black Friday shopping, and being in the busy stores and the busy traffic, and that kind of thing. And truly that's okay. That's their definition of success, and they love that energy and that kind of thing.
That's right.
But then there are some who would prefer to be, sipping on some hot cocoa and watching Christmas Vacation or Elf or something like that, and just having a bit more,
It's me.
yeah, a bit more of a low key experience. But then you also have this paradigm where, okay, what happens on Christmas Eve, Christmas morning? Are we going to go see family on both sides? Are we going to the Christmas Eve service? Are we, I mean, and for those of us who are musicians, are we singing on Christmas Eve or Christmas morning? Things like that. And I think that joy, quite often just needs to be predefined. My buddy Greg always says, what is your definition of success with regards to, X? And I think that we kind of just slide in sideways, hoping not to disappoint other people,
Yeah.
you
Yep.
know, wife and kids, things like that, as opposed to saying, I've predetermined that these things are going to happen in my home, right? I'm going to lead the way and lead my family into uh, a calmer, more meaningful, sweet month, as opposed to, oh crap, we have to be 9 places this week, and everybody starts to hate each other,
Yeah,
So
so true. It's amazing how, whether it's a little bit of planning, but setting an intention, right? Being just proactive in what type of holiday experience do we want to create, and do we
right,
want to have, and what types of behaviors would match that, right? And what really matters in this as you prioritize those things, right? We hear these, tropes and maxims, the reason for the season. those things that are ideally supposed to bring us back to like what really is the reason, that we're supposed to celebrate all this. But it's so easy to get lost, in the expectations, and whether that's work parties that we're supposed to go to, and
Right.
seeing family, extended family and people we don't always interact with, and all the expectations of how we're supposed to put on the smiley face, right? And
Yeah.
I remember way back in grad school when I was doing counseling at the college counseling center, we would see this huge increase of requests for crisis counseling, and especially right around the holidays, right as kids were getting ready to leave school and go back home for an extended period. So
Sure.
during the Christmas break, it was especially pronounced. So I was like, what in the world's going on? Like, the kids just stressed out that they don't have the, money, or, for Christmas or whatever it was. But turns out as they came in, is that they all had a very similar story, that when they would go home, right, at school, they felt like they were autonomous. They handled challenges and problems at school in ways that were age appropriate. They felt good about the decisions they made. They go back home, and they often said it was like the moment they walked through the door, their identity got hijacked, and they
Wow.
often would say a very specific age. It's like, I'm 5 years old or 7 years old or 12 years old, whatever it is, right? And
Yeah.
nothing I do is good enough, and I'm immediately bickering with my brother or sister, and my parents are on me, and I lose. It's like I become a child, and I don't know how to change it, right? I don't know how to stop that from happening, and it would often last. Like, the lingering effect of that would continue as they got back to school. It would take several weeks for them, and even their roommates would often be like, are you okay? And so, and I think that's not uncommon what happens for a lot of people, right? As they
Yeah.
start to go to these events, having the external environment kind of, pull on them, expectations of who other people expect them to be. We have this sense of who we want to be versus how other people see us. When those
Right.
conflict, man, it can really create a lot of pressure and internal angst. Does that make sense?
Oh man, I absolutely. And as you were talking there, I was thinking, the definition of success quite often, when we think about that, and of course we mentioned that would be like, okay, what are we saying yes to and no to as far as time commitments and so on. But what you're kind of hitting on there is, this, the kind of what's under the hood, kind of the deeper stuff of life. And,
Yeah.
so it's an interesting thing thinking I'm going to go home and I start getting anxious. I'm going home,
Yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
home, it should be, right? When I think about, when people walk into my house, I try to, create an atmosphere like you're home. I don't care who you are, right? It's like, come on in here, welcome home, give them a hug, that kind of stuff. I'm like, we're glad you're here because we truly are.
I've been to your
And
home. That's it's true.
it's a funny thing because I think that, that quite often, our man, and it should be, right? Our expectation of going home should be really sweet. It should be, it's a place where, you're celebrated and you feel, wanted. And, my buddy Chris wrote a song about, a song called Welcome Home. And it says, this is a dream I've had that there might be a place. And before I cross the threshold, they recognize my face. They've been expecting me. The table has been set. The bed's already made. I mean, it's just this idea that this is the place that I always return to because it satisfies something in my heart. It's just a great place to be. And so the stuff that's under the hood though that causes us to be, oh no, I really don't want to go to that home anymore. It's always filled with some anxiety and that kind of stuff. So I think not only do we need to predetermine in advance, the things we're going to say yes to and no to with regards to our time. I tell you what, we've heard it said 1,000 times, and I'm guessing that you've told so many people that you've coached this. You cannot control someone else, but you can control yourself. But here's something fascinating is when you say I'm going to predetermine, the impact that I want to have, the presence that I'm going to, bring to bear, with these, these family members or aunts and uncles or things like that. It's if you haven't predetermined those things that you value, you're gonna be just kind of holding your finger up in the air, trying to find some sense of peace, as opposed to I want to go home, to that setting and create an atmosphere that's beautiful, create an atmosphere
Yeah.
that's calm, and not get sucked into, someone else's definition of crazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that the predetermining really has to start with you, start with the individual, and saying, I value these things, and this is what I'm bringing. I'm going to help set the temperature, and if you will, in that room to something that is, and what I like to say is just something that's awesome, as opposed to, everybody's kind of eking around, hoping not to step on each other's toes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's certainly very aspirational, or should I say aspirational, right?
Inspirational.
Um, but it's interesting. I think we may have talked about this on a different live stream at some point, but this tension that exists sometimes between authenticity and attachment. So when I say attachment, right, it's just this desire to want to fit in and belong. And
Yeah.
so, authenticity is being true to yourself. And so, you go home, and whether this is seeing old friends from high school or whatever it is, right? Or this is going to the work parties, there's this sense of, all right, what does it first off mean to be true to ourselves? And even if we haven't dialed that in, even if we haven't taken the time to really, go through and get super crystal clear on our values, to understand, why we do the things that we do, and some of the work that we guide people through, there's still inherently kind of a sense of, what it's like to be true to yourself, right? That little intuition voice that often says, I don't think this is a good idea, or this doesn't feel right, but we often just ignore it, right? And choose to kind of move forward because, oftentimes the draw to want to fit in, it's so powerful, right? This desire
Right.
to want to belong and to feel a part of, it really is powerful. And if we haven't gotten really clear in who we are, right, this tension between authenticity and attachment, the attachment's going to win every single time,
Right.
right? Because the authenticity pull, the magnet forward or gravitational pull isn't strong enough. And inevitably what happens is we get the immediate gratification of fitting in, right? That
Yeah.
sense of like, oh, they like me, right? I'm a part of. But we get the long-term effect of, but I did it in a way, right, that just really, I compromised my values. I drank too much. I talked in ways that I don't want to talk. I was disrespectful to my spouse, or whatever it is, these things, right? Because I wanted to fit in the moment. And if we don't course correct to that, right, the internal guilt around that, like, it just creates a snowball effect. And
Yeah.
next thing you know, like, you really don't enjoy being in your own kind of space, right? Being you.
Right.
And that is a travesty.
Man, that's an interesting moment there. It's like you start resenting them and yourself.
Yeah.
There's
Yep.
an internal conflict that you're most of the time you're not really necessarily aware of it, but you start to feel less comfortable in your own skin, and you're just a general sense of irritability. One thing, of course, going through your True North blueprint and understanding, my core values, those things that light me up, the impact that I want to have, the things that give me goosebumps and things like that, the dent that I want to have, when I'm around people. Not that I have to, but that I get to. You know what I mean? It's a
Right.
what I love about that is when I keep those things in front of me, course correcting, right? Because we're depending on indigestion or lack of sleep or whatever that is. It's like we're course correcting all the time. But that feeling of genuineness is, I mean, it's just awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you're not pretending or posturing and or playing some game, you can walk into a room and you're just kind of looking around like, hey guys, what's up? As opposed to wondering what people are thinking and feeling like you have to play some part or generate something. The sense of I think courage even starts to rise. I remember having some conversations, with some family members, and during the holidays several years ago,
Right.
and with regards to our time and so on. And so we would just ask, because sometimes people are in tradition mode and they just kind of go with it just because that's what you did, as opposed to saying, hey guys,
Oh yeah.
are we
Yeah.
all on the same sheet of music here? And are these activities at this time something that everybody wants to do and
Yep.
feel kind of hurried and that kind of stuff? Well, everybody's like, well, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I wasn't sure if we would have offend somebody, that kind of thing. So I think that this idea of feeling authentic, feeling genuine, living out of that safe, natural place, when you have courage, at that point, just to kind of, again, not bully and stuff, but just bring up a topic in
Yep.
a gracious way, it's amazing what tends to unfold then. But if you're acting out of an inauthentic place, well, then fear is usually ruling. There's
Oh
an
yeah.
insecurity and a I don't know, like uh, well, maybe it's the imposter, syndrome kind of rising up. And then something you touched on with regards to that internal battle, you just feel kind of fatigued. There's conflict going on, so you're just like, heck with it. I'm just not going to go there. I don't really have what it takes. There's a fragmentation in your thoughts, all that kind of thing, as opposed to, okay, I see the bigger picture, and I'm very courageously and graciously going to start asking questions, and maybe we're on the same page, and we can, together as a family, paint a different definition of success here.
Yeah, yeah. But I wonder if, using the rowing the boat metaphor, right? If we
Okay,
went through
yeah,
those three, the three biggest mistakes that I see people make in their desire to want to be happy, right, successful and fulfilled, it applies, I think, to the holidays. So if we went through each of those, just real quick and briefly, give some practical suggestions that people could apply in this holiday season to start to reclaim their joy, right? Because there's no doubt, if you're operating in your authenticity, right? And authenticity, let's be clear, autonomy, authenticity is not this, you can't tell me what to do, this rebellious sense of I'm going
yeah,
to do whatever I want, right? And regardless of how it makes anyone feel, that's not authenticity. That's just emotional, reactiveness. That's not very intentional. So, but using the first mistake that I see people make, right, is not having a clear direction, or feeling like you're rowing in really inconsistent and sometimes contradictory ways, right?
right.
So this is the way I want to be going. So I got one arm, right, going over here, and I feel like with my family or my spouse or church, right, like that is where I want to be going. But then with work or another's, right, my arm's rowing in a completely different direction. And if you've ever rowed a boat, you know that when you've got two arms going in opposite directions, you're spinning around in circles, right? And do you even know what direction that you're heading in for this holidays? And what I mean is, what are you committing to, right? What are the choices? What people are you choosing to spend time with? Are they rowing in the same direction? And I think the best way to resolve that is to have your values clarified, and how much are your decisions, your commitments, right, the relationships that you're really investing in during this time, how clear are they aligned with your values? Because when they are, I bet your joy absolutely amplifies in ways that are magical for the holiday season. What do you
Yeah.
think about that in regards to having a clear direction, intention for the holidays, and how to apply that?
So it's fascinating. This is a little bit of a curve, maybe a roundabout way of touching on that. So if I ever walk into a room and there's leadership happening, right? Somebody has an agenda, the temperature's set, and I like it, and I'm in. I'm like, all right, let's go. But if there's not, I'm happy to take the lead. Or if I think that it's going in the wrong direction and there's some type of a conflict or something, I don't mind stepping into that space. Well,
Right.
when you think about that as a family, quite often if someone is joyful and confident and excited about something, and it's genuine, right? It's not this kind of manufactured nonsense. Very few people are actually going to, kind of buck the system, as it were, right? They're going to be like, oh man, Dad's excited about that, and he seems like genuinely like this is a really good thing. All right, let's go. Let's go to grandma's at this time. Let's do this. Let's open gifts here. Let's say no to that party. That kind of thing. And it's so I think that quite often the temperature is set because someone is really clear, on what they value, and there's joy in it. If you don't know what you value uniquely, right? Lisa and I value different things at different times. But if I don't know what I really value, guess what? I'm not going to be very happy because
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
always this conflict. There's this question mark, that kind of thing. It's not that I can't be flexible and go with someone else's values, but I'm using my values, if you will, to participate and get
Yeah.
behind that, as
Well
opposed
said.
to constantly feeling like I'm being pulled in a direction that I don't want to go because I don't know what direction I want to go. So I like this idea of people having a really clear understanding of what lights them up, what gives you goosebumps.
Yeah.
One of the things that we do, in our family, we just call it family time, right? I kind of holler, I'm like, hey guys, everybody get in here, and they come running, and then we just kind of go around the room, and you kind of get to say, whatever you want, where are you right now? If you got a struggle, let's just bring that up, that kind of thing. But one of the things that, again, I predetermined is that when we're in that space, it is safe. Like you can say anything
Awesome.
you want and nobody's going to try to fix you or judge you. Like it's a safe place to kind of process and all that kind of stuff. And then we usually,
So good.
get in the huddle, hug each other, say a prayer, and and move on with it. But I think the same type of an atmosphere can be painted for holiday events, right? It doesn't need to be
Absolutely.
a bunch of stinking drama and an idea that you would somehow put tradition over, human concern.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I just love this idea of creating an atmosphere of, hey, we've got a beautiful Christmas tree and lights. I just put up lights out on the front deck and all that kind of stuff. But the agenda around, keeping traditions alive, which I love, and my home is never going to take the place, of humans, right? And what they need and love and laughter and margin and peace and space and that kind of stuff. If we're late to someone's Christmas party because we just, we're having a great interaction and a talk, okay, we're going to be late. We might be early if it's me, honestly, because I'm rarely late. But it's um, again, I think the
Having your
predetermined,
priorities straight, right?
yeah,
And super clear.
absolutely, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And hopefully anybody that's listening but like, do you have a framework for making decisions, right? Do you have a clear set of criteria that help you to know what direction should you head in? We're heading to a wedding this weekend, and there's certainly some stress around it, some family dynamics and some various other things. But one of my core values is fun, right? So when I lean back into that, I'm like, this is people that I love, and I'm getting a chance to bring my kids along to this. It's gonna be fun, right? It's gonna be really fun. And when I prioritize that and just kind of, remind myself that this is a value, let's be playful, right? Don't take myself too seriously. Like those, I've got certain, behaviors that I know for me help me to get into that space of being aligned with that value. It's amazing how all of a sudden it's like, yeah, that's right. All the other stuff is really insignificant and not important. This is
yeah,
what matters. So,
love
would
that.
love to encourage anyone out there, right? Like there's stuff you can find online to try and clarify your values. Obviously, we've got some really great resources and tools, but man, getting clear on those and then using those as the guideposts for the directions that you're heading in is extremely, extremely powerful. So
And
the
I'll
number,
just let me piggyback on that real quick. I know, as Dr. Andy and someone who has a blueprint that you take people through and so on, it's kind of hard to sell that as it were. But I just want to say that, when I went through your course, I thought that I had understood, a lot of those things that I value, those things that light me up and strengths and that kind of stuff. But what's fascinating is your unique progression on establishing those things was something so different than what I've ever done. And it's amazing now, after I've seen, continue to again to keep those things kind of front and center, making decisions that feel so much more genuine to me, so much more fulfilling. But the ripple effect of that in my life is borderline staggering. Like I'm seeing, other people, be affected by the fact that I have a whole lot more an inner constitution that's really aligned with those things that bring me a lot of joy, peace and strength. And so I like the fact that you don't tell people what they should be thinking and all that kind of stuff. You ask the right questions to allow them to discover those, or identify, right? Identity, those things in themselves that rise to the top. And that's the huge difference.
love hearing too, and love, and I see personally the effect, right, that you really clarifying your values and living those out, that it's had, for you and the people that you lead and around. So yeah, appreciate that. The number two mistake I see is using the rowing the boat metaphor, right? Is rowing against the flow of the stream versus going with the flow, right? And what that means is that you choose to do things, could be tradition, right? Things that, well, this is how we've always done it. Could be things that's like, well, I'm good at this, but I don't enjoy it, right? So there's a sense of feeling that they're obligatory. Could be things that you really just feel tremendous resistance to do, right? There's always procrastination, this desire. And I'm not saying that you don't have to sometimes just force yourself to do unpleasant things, of course, right? That's just a part. But a lot of people, like, they fill their calendars up with one thing after the next of things that just deplete them,
Yep.
right? So they're, spending all their time around Christmas, the holiday season, with things that really either aren't aligned with their values, that don't, that they're not intrinsically motivated for, right? Or, they spend all their time doing things that are extrinsically motivated. So, it's just wanting to please other people, right? Wanting to, make as much income as possible, whatever it might be. The problem with extrinsic motivation, right, is that it's a very not a good renewable resource, because you get it, right? You get people's approval. It feels good. You get that immediate gratification, that hit of dopamine, but that quickly wears off, right? And if you don't have something within you that makes you feel full, independent of that, all of a sudden you find yourself like craving, needing more and more of that thing. And ultimately, you will find yourself perpetually chasing something that will never fulfill you, right? And leave you really, really dissatisfied, anxious, angry. I mean, you should see the research results around people who are highly extrinsically motivated and who are successful at getting that. It's awful, right? These people are often seen as very selfish, angry, anxious, dissatisfied. So I don't think that's the holiday season you're shooting for and the type of person you want to be.
Right.
But when all of a sudden the things that you do are the things that light you up, right? I'm jumping into roles that I love taking on, right? I'm using strengths that I love extending myself and challenging myself to get better at. And I'm doing things that the mere act of doing them just makes me feel alive, right? It brings me
Love that.
excitement.
Man, I
That's
love
what you
that.
want to be doing.
That I think that's the best way to couch the understanding of authenticity. The act of being authentic, you've hit that sweet spot when the act of doing it is reward enough. It just feels, it just feels right. You feel like you are alive and you're not trying to generate, something for someone else to, applaud, that kind of thing.
And I could imagine, right? If someone was listening to this, they might say, that sounds really nice, right? That sounds wonderful. I'd love that. Sign me up for wanting to do more of that. How do you, briefly, knowing that we're going to wrap up here in a few minutes, how do you discover those things, right? Like I could imagine that being difficult. I don't know, David, do you have any thoughts or feedback on how you've been able to start to really identify those things that you want to do more and more of, and the things that really light you up, so that you're committing to things that, because the beautiful thing when you're going with the flow, right, is you're getting further and further along, right? You're getting more out of it, but somehow it feels like you're putting less effort. That's not necessarily the case, but when you're intrinsically motivated, that's how you get into flow state, right? It's how you start to really find that your performance, your productivity, right, your joy, all those things go up while your happiness and fulfillment go up simultaneously. So it's like, man, why am I getting so much done and feel like I'm so on fire? And yet I've got all this bandwidth inside of me, right, that I'm like ready to go run a marathon. I'm ready. Maybe that's a little extreme, but it's amazing how it fills you up simultaneously while you're also performing at your highest level. How do you define or identify those things?
Well, that's obviously going through your course too, right? You get asked those questions that allow you to, I guess, wade into those waters, wade into those weeds. And what's kind of cool is, and you say this, quite often, it's follow the clues. So when you're choosing a vocabulary that describes those things, I feel like, for me, like when we did the core values exercise, like my top two are, God, inspiration, and beauty. And what's fascinating about that is those words have some overlap. Like inspiration to me sometimes is laughing as hard as I can, right? There's some fun, there's some play, there's some things in there. Sometimes it's a meaningful piece of music or a conversation or something like that. I mean, inspiration means to breathe life into. So that, what I like to do is to breathe life into people that I feel like need that. And sometimes I do too, by the way. And sometimes I can inspire myself, for that matter, and remind myself of those things
Awesome.
that I value. And so I think that, again, Andy, I've learned so much of this from you, right? The word authenticity comes from the word author. What's been authored in me? I did not make me. And those of us who have children know that they come out of the gate incredibly different. So when we identify those authored things in us and follow the clues, well then, okay, if I say this type of thing, if I do this type of thing, if I say yes to this type of thing and no to this type of thing, if I identify with this type of a, group of people and have these types of interactions and so on, and it causes my energy to rise, right? I mean, it's like, what does that mean? I just get happier. I feel like, man, I want to do more of that. Well, that's a clue. And I remember listening to my grandmother say when she was balancing, checkbooks, and she did bookkeeping and so on, she would be in her office just giggling. Like she loved math and numbers and solving problems and that kind of stuff.
Awesome.
I mean, like literally, she'd come out of her office just smiling from ear to ear that she solved some problem that one of her clients had, that they, couldn't balance their checkbook or something. And of course, to me, I got a kick out of that just watching her, right?
Yeah.
But if I had to go do bookkeeping and things like that, I mean, I would just disintegrate.
It'd be tears, not laughter. Tears come out for me.
But the clues for her are different than me, and that's when we're talking about authenticity and authorship. God made her different. So when we identify with the vocabulary and get real clear on those things, well, we have predetermined, I'm going to say yes to these types of things and no to these types of things. And if I say yes to something that I shouldn't have, well, I know it's not a what I'm course correcting to, it's a who. And that's what I love about, authenticity and identity. It's rather, in some ways elementary, but at the same time, incredibly profound. And so I'm not going to, when you're a kid, you want to be like your dad or something, or your older brother, and that's normal, right? But when you self-actualize, which many people haven't, I mean, many people are just looking for, the talking heads and podcasts and all this kind of stuff to find something to latch onto, to give them some sense of mission or happiness or purpose, as opposed to looking inside and figuring out what did God put in you uniquely. And that's where life starts. You feel like you're a child again. You feel like you can play again. You feel like you can breathe again in many cases, as opposed to just feeling just absolutely exhausted, like you're constantly looking for something and generating something.
Awesome. I think there's an exercise that we have in the course, but it's just as simple as like, taking time to stop before you do something and asking yourself, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And to what end? And it's amazing, especially if you understand what intrinsic motivation is versus extrinsic. But when you start to get clear and you connect your behaviors, even if it's stuff that maybe you're not intrinsically motivated to do, but it is connected to a larger overall purpose, right? It's like, well, I have to do this because it's allowing me to get to a place that's really important to me. It's just amazing how all of a sudden the fuel to do that thing, right? The purpose behind it, the energy and everything about it just transforms. And so there's some really cool, easy ways to be able to start to tap into it and just be more intentional. Like the act of authenticity, so you just know why you're doing things, is a complete game changer, right? And you start choosing the right things to do. The last one, I'm just going to drive it home because I got to run here. But it's just knowing your strengths, right? So if you're rowing a boat, ideally, as David's pointed out wonderfully, we're all unique. So the specific body type that we have, the muscles that we have, right? There's probably a unique rowing strategy that is the best leverage of your body type. And yet we often we downplay our strengths. We don't have a strategy for how to implement them or leverage them. We often look at other people's rowing strategies or what they're doing and like, I should be more like them. We do a lot of social comparison. But the more that we're able to recognize as a family, right, during the holiday season, what are the things that we really are good at and that we enjoy, and how are we intentionally using those to really get the most out of this holiday season? And that's not just so much about the selfish, how are we getting filled, but like, how are we using those strengths to pour into others, right? Because we know there's tremendous happiness and joy that comes from just loving on others, but especially when we do it in a way, right, that's unique to us. And so the more that we have a clear direction, right, the biggest stress that we can have, and this has been defined in a number of studies, but when we act in ways that are untrue to who we are, that is the greatest stress that we will create ourselves, right? We also know the biggest regret that people have at the end of their life is not living a life true to themselves. So clearly, this idea of operating in life in a way that's untrue to who you are has significant and debilitating psychological consequences, right? So knowing what direction you're going, knowing why you do what you do, so you're going with the flow instead of constantly having to work through all this resistance. And I don't really want to do this, right? And by the time I'm done with it, I am depleted and burnt out. I don't feel effective in it because the truth is I don't want to be doing it.
Yeah.
right? And then knowing your strengths. When all of a sudden your holidays lines up with those three things, I promise you, right, you will have reclaimed your joy, and this will be a fantastic holiday. It's a great way. I think back just real briefly to the students that came in, and were like, help me not, become the 10-year-old when I go back home. Really the truth is the more that they anchored themselves, the autonomous person they were operating at school, how do you hang on to that even when you go to an environment that's expecting something completely different from you?
Right.
That's difficult. Like, I'm not going to lie and say that that's an easy thing to do, but how do you stay true to yourself even when people are making comments and saying things that haven't been true about who you are for maybe decades, right?
Oh
But they
man.
still see you as that little child, or they still see you as that,
Right.
whatever that is. So the ability to maintain the composure and stay strong in that foundation, right? That's how you reclaim your joy.
Love it. Well said.
All right, brother. It's always fun, man. I know we gotta get in here and do it again, but we wish everyone just a tremendous holiday season. If there's any way that we can breathe a little inspiration or life into your holidays, or help you to get more enjoyment out of it, please comment and connect. That's we really, that's what we do. So it's who we are, right?
Who we are.
Awesome.
Thanks, Andy.